think we should start.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Before we start the presentation, I would like to give a short introduction of Dr. Goyal. Dr. Surendra Prakash Goyal did his master's and PhD in zoology and joined WII in November 1986. Before joining the institute in 86, Dr. Goyal had worked on desert mammals and wild ungulates like Indian gazelle and blackbuck in the Thar Desert at Central Arid Zone Research Institute, Jodhpur, for a period of 10 years. His research interests include study on the ecology, biology, animal habitat interaction, and ecophysiology of ungulates and carnivores. He has published around 250 research papers in international and national journals and has contributed significantly for 3 books on wildlife. Dr. Goyal has recently been involved in developing wildlife forensic science at the institute, that is Wildlife Institute of India, especially dealing with wildlife crimes for the last 20 years. Major emphasis has been setting the infrastructure for the wildlife forensic facility and in developing protocols for species identification, crime scene investigation, and collections of samples. Dr. Goyal has also recently provided technical input for setting the wildlife forensic facility and has worked with them for 3 years to organize training programs for the scientists as well as for crime scene investigation. Dr. Goyal has organized a number of training programs for the enforcement agencies for dealing with wildlife crimes. Now, I would Dr. Goyal superannuated on 31st August 2014, spending 28 years at Wildlife Institute of India and has now joined back the institute as emeritus scientist and is currently working as a subject matter specialist. Now I hand over to Dr. Goyal to do the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much and good afternoon to everyone. And especially I thanks to Dr. Chauhan that I got an opportunity to share some of the important management issues which we have been talking. As she has just told that I have been with the institute, and among all our conservation or the management issues, one of the major problem which we have been talking a lot for almost more than 2 decades is the human leopard conflict. And if you try to see, still across the country and across the globe, this problem has been prevalent almost everywhere. And if you try to see within our country, we always talk, this issues for that one. But if you try to look how much we have tried to put a, heed on to understand the ecology or biology of the species, especially in the conflict zone. There are very few studies so far exist. Still, in spite of that, this species has been very severely in the conflict. If you try to name, there are few studies which have been done in the Maharashtra. There's some study in the West Bengal, some in Uttarakhand, but there are still we are lacking to understand the ecology or biology of this species, especially in the conflict. So at the institute, being a nodal agency, and when in Uttarakhand, late Sri Negi Sabha, the chief wildlife warden, he insisted because the Uttarakhand has been prevailing a lot of such conflicts, and he suggested, why don't we try to undertake a study on the leopard ecology? So this was the beginning where we made a sub-beginning, but still I can tell you, if you try to look the literature, we do not find a very detailed studies on this species. We do talk, and that's when I'm going to share some of my understanding of this species while dealing, especially in Uttarakhand, and try to talk about the human-wildlife conflict. One of the important things which you should know very well, and we should try to understand, this leopard is a very, very generalist. What I mean by generalist, it can occupy in any kind of the habitat. It's not like a species where the tiger, we say it requires a nice inviolate area. And this is the one species what across the globe, it's not in the India, has been a very, very generalist, can occupy any kind from like talking about the Sahara Desert to the even in the mountain forest. And it has got a plasticity in the behavior. What I mean by plasticity, that it can change its behavior, and it is much more courageous also. And it can really invade in the human habitations. This is one of the things that is very frequently is a bold animal. It try to change the behavior and it can really have a high plasticity. Another important thing that it can survive on any kind of the prey, whether it's domestic or wild. And I still remember when in the Sariska Tiger Reserve, when we were working, we have been going with the diploma classes. Then just after the good monsoon, and you may not believe, almost 100% diet of the leopard was on the rodent. So what I want to make the point here is that this is a very, very versatile. It can change. It can eat from a rodent to the even the antelope or the deer species. So or even the domestic animal, and it has got a tolerance to the human being. So these are the characteristic has been a very, very prevailing this animal to come in the conflict, and this is the way we should try to understand whether this conflict is a random process or it is a some kind of some places it is taking place. So in spite of having severe problem over the years within the country, as I told you, we never try to pay a heed on understanding this one, and that's the one thing is there. Another important thing that most of this, as I told you, this animal live in the marginal habitat. If you try to see this leopard is heavily built like almost like a tiger. This is in the Pauri Garhwal, and most of the thing, if you try to see that across the India or the other parts of the world, most of the reason that decline is the habitat quality and habitat fragmentation. We do talk those species of marginal, marginal species or marginal habitat, but still the degradation has been taking place where animal has been really looking for the nice places to hide and they come in the conflict. Another one of the reason what we try to understand is that scarcity of the wild prey. In most of the area which the leopard usually occupy, as I told you, the marginal habitat never have been a very high density of the wild prey species. So most of the time they try to rely or try to search the prey species which are very, very scarce, which are very, very limited, and they are not in a high density. Another major, threats which has been emerging and which has been a very, very powerful, like a human-wildlife conflict, is a poaching. And I strongly believe that if we do not try to control the poaching and this HWC or the human wildlife conflict, this animal is going to be extinct from the number of places. So these two regions, these are a couple of the regions which people have been trying to generalize, but we never got a in-depth information on this, and I would try to share some of the things for this one. As I told you, the poaching is one of the major concerns across the world. Within India, and it's being heavily poached. And being in a marginal species, we never try to have a nice patrolling, nice surveillance in those areas, and everybody, any poacher take the best advantage of killing this animal, and finally it can enter in the international market. And as you know, this animal loves the dog. And if you happen to go in Himalaya, most of these pet dog which people they keep, they put a what you can call the spike collar around the dog. So no leopard can really pick up the dog. So this is the species which can be easily killed. Like this is the one animal which was poached very close to our institute. Is a place called Kadwa Pani, and somebody has tried to put a what you can call the clutch wire of the snare and put below the antenna, and it was caught. And finally we could not save, and finally we end up in this kind of a problem. So these two regions, the conflict and the poaching, really can have a major conservation issues in for this species in our country. And finally, we try to make the seizure. So we should try to pay much more attention on this species, because we might be able to say tiger or any other large cat, but this animal is going to vanish from number of areas if we do not try to pay attention on this one. As you know, most of these animals have been, seizures have been taken place in the Delhi and Uttarakhand. And we know these are the areas where there are no leopard. But definitely there are, what you can call the smuggling points are there, or the traders are sitting there, or that could be one of the reasons. So what I want to make the point that the two management issues which are prevailing quite a lot for the leopard, and we may have to pay attention on this one. If you try to see, it's not only the male or female, it's both male and female have been heavily poached. So people have been trying to go each and every area, because we believe that most of the time males are much more prone. But definitely if you try to see, even the females have been killed, it means people are entering in the habitat of the leopard and try to manage to kill. So these are some of the issues which might cause a concern for our management. And if you try to see that we all talk the conservation and the management, and one of the major, a basic principle of the management is that in the evolutionary process or ecological process, should be a random mating should be present. If the random mating is present, the population can have a nice genetic fitness. And one of the things which, as animals have been, removed or they have been killed or the poached, then most of the chances of the non-random mating has been increased. And what it leads to the inbreeding, loss of the genetic fitness, and finally our all conservation goal will be completely in the doomed manner. So this is the one thing we should try to understand how best we can manage the random mating if we really want to get a conservation issues. And this is the one of the concerns which we should try to monitor the species in most of the area, whether there is a random mating is present or there is a non-random, because ultimately non-random is going to lead to a loss of genetic viability or the loss of genetic fitness. So we try to work on the habitat degradation. As you know, in the Uttarakhand, most of the mountains have been heavily, logged, and most of the area have been heavily degraded. And as soon as the most of the tree canopy level has been, removed or has been taken out, then what finally we get is an understory, what is basically the scrub area. So this is one of the reasons that in most of the area, the scrub has been highly dominating in whole mountains. And this could be one of the reasons why a much more conflict is taking place. And I'll be talking what is the significance of this one. Another reason which we have been talking, we have been issued is the decline of the wild prey. This is one of the reasons that in most of the mountains, the wild prey have been heavily poached for the meat purposes. So there is a really great scarcity of the wild prey present in this landscape. So looking to this one, finally, the people have been taking the retaliatory killing. Whenever this opportunity comes, the people, they try to kill, and finally you can see how this beautiful animal has been poached or has been killed when in the retaliatory killing. So this is the one thing we should try to see, that these problems are prevailing, how best we can manage. And I would still personally feel that management or the conservation should be based on the sound information which should be collected for that particular area, and we should understand what's happening to that one. Looking to this reason, looking to all these problems, we selected the Pauri Garhwal. There are one of the reasons why we selected the Pauri Garhwal. If we try to see, the problems have been much more prevalent in the West Bengal, then the Maharashtra is there, then the Himachal Pradesh is there, and Uttarakhand. So we looked all the data, before starting this study across all the 4 states where have been high conflict. And ultimately, we found the Pauri Garhwal has been a very, very severely impacted in Uttarakhand among all the 4 states. And that's why we try to, because this is the first study which we planned, and then try to look the ecology and behavior. And that was one of the reasons why we selected the Pauri Garhwal, because it has got a high content. So this whole study we have planned in the 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. The phase 1 was just to understand what is the extent of the problem, whether the problem is random or it's being taking place at some places. Because this is the one thing you should try to understand, that where is the problem is there, and then you can do a good management. So we try to, put in this one, and the first phase we try to understand the Pauri Garhwal, where is the problem is there. So we try to address the question is the extent and intensity. And the major question comes whether all leopards which are found in the Pauri Garhwal or Himalayas are all man-eater, or there are only few are man-eater. So this is the first question we should try to answer the thing, that whether it is a random process or is a skewed process, or what I mean skewed means they are taking place at some places. Visualizing this one, this is the whole Pauri Garhwal district, which is almost close to the 5,400 square kilometer. And what we did, we try to divide this whole area in the grid of the 2 by 2. And each and every grid we have tried to assess what extent of the problem is there. So one of the stratification has to be there, whether the problem is everywhere or is being found in the few places, and that was the question we tried to answer. If we try to see, we look where are the human have been killed by the leopard in whole Pauri Garhwal. If we try to see, we classify this whole conflict with the human, where the human have been killed by the leopard. And if we try to see, not whole Pauri Garhwal is being impacted by the leopard as a especially for killing the human being. There are few places which is like a Dokuta, Pabo, and the Pauri Garhwal, and there are Thelisand. There are few places where this problem is much more higher or the high conflict zone, or remaining places are all the random process. So if you really want to look or try to look some kind of a management intervention, the best places are, these are the area where one has to try to look what could be the reason. So these red, what you see is this a high conflict zone, and but the rest is orange, or is a no problem, or is a low conflict zone. So one thing we try to understand in the whole dynamics, that problem is not everywhere. There are only few places the problem is much more prevalent, and that's where we have tried to address. So the problem of leopard is the two kinds. One is the human killing, and another what you can call the livestock depredation. When we try to add the data on the livestock depredation and then try to put as a zone, the conflict zone, which includes both human as well as the domestic animal. And if you try to see the red colors, the grid which you see, these are the all high conflict zones. So what we suggested the department or the Uttarakhand government, that these are the area where we should try to invest much more, or try to look much more that what could be the causes of this conflicts are there, why these are happening, and why the problem is not there. So one thing we try to understand, the problem is not a random, it is being skewed, or it's being taking place at the few places. So this is the one thing that we should always try to put a generator map where is the major problem, or problem is randomly distributed, then you will find there are no such serious consequences are there, because animal is moving from one place to the another. But when the problem is taking at few places, then is a major management concern is there, and we have tried to tackle the situation. Over the years, the animals, whenever this has been killed, or the leopard has been killed by the human being, and you said these incidences have been going on the Uttarakhand or the Pauri Garhwal for a longer time. On an average, if you try to see, 20 to 30 people have been killed in that alone in the district. So problem has been a severe number of times the people have been killed as well as the injured. So this has been prevailed for a longer time, and that's why we try to address the questions for this one. If you try to see, it's not only the human being have been killed, at the same time, as soon as the man-eater take place, it has been declared as a man-eater, and finally animal has been killed by the calling in the hunter. And you can say substantial number of the animals have been killed every year. But in spite of that, removing these all animals, which are substantial and every year, still the problem has been prevailed in this district, and this is one of the reasons which we try to look for that. One of the important thing, if we try to understand, we try to look, one of the management strategy what we have been doing, as soon as there is a conflict take place, we declare the animal and we try to remove the animal from the system. And as soon as the animal has been killed, you try to see there are less number of the incidents that are taking place. But as a span of 2 years, again the problem is emerging out. It means most of those areas which were unoccupied, or an animal has been removed, it has been reoccupied from the adjoining animal, and the problem has been prevailing again. And most of the cycle, what we found is almost 2 years, and the problem again recurs, and finally again animal has been killed. So this is the one thing is we found that animals are reoccupied by the adjoining area, and problem has been prevailing in the same landscape. One of the important things which we try to look most of the times we try to look for the prey, because animal is looking some kind of the food in that one. And when we to look these high conflict areas, then what we interesting thing found is that we look the number of villages, and then we look the number of the area conflict, and what we try to look is that actually this is you can see this is a green, what you see the green one is the leopard kills the human being, and yellow one is little bit is a mistake, is a livestock kill. So if you try to see, there is an inverse relationship between a human killed and the livestock killing. So wherever the livestock have been highly predated, there are less number of the humans have been depredated. So one of the important things what we have understood, there are feral cattle which are prevailing in that area, and if the feral cattle are there, or feral domestic animals are there, then there is a less chances of the human depredation is present, and this is the inverse relationship. So we try to understand in this dynamics that feral and livestock contributes a lot, and try to minimize the depredation on the human, especially on human being. One of the important things which we know on the ecology or the biology of the species, whether it's a learned behavior or not. Most of the cats, they take their cubs whenever they try to kill any prey is that one. So probably whenever the cubs are going with the mother and they know what my mother has been killed, a particular kind of the animal or the human being, whether it's imprinted or not. So this is still a very, very, very little has been known in this context. And the question is that whether it's a learned behavior or not. And what we try to do, we got an opportunity in one of the area where there was a female with the two cubs, and a man eating has taken place, and the animal was finally removed. Female has been removed from that area, and finally the cub has also been removed. In this one, there are two cubs were there, and when the one cub was removed and one cub could not be removed. And if you try to see, then we were having a chance to regularly monitor this cub presence in that area. And we found after the 2 years, again in the same area, a human depredation have taken place. So probably this cub which might have learned in that process that what mother has been killed, and probably he might able to become again as a man-eater. So this is the one thing we should try to answer the question, whether it's again, as I told you, the random or it's a learned behavior. And I strongly believe that definitely, because in the felid, whenever the mother goes for any predation or the killing any wild animal or the domestic or the human being, the cubs always go with them. In order to understand, we try to answer the question through the genetic. We look all the, the alleged man-eater which have been killed in this area. And when we did the DNA analysis of all those alleged man-eater, and we found all those man-eater will be highly related compared to what animals have been found. It means that probably this high relatedness means they are closely related to each other. It means probably they are either is a first kin or maybe a cousin, or they might have learned the behavior, and that could be one of the reasons. So my understanding in this whole behavior is that we should try to understand that whether it is a learned behavior. If it is not a learned behavior, then the process could be random. As I told you, this is a very, very limited data we have got. We have got only the 14 individuals, but definitely I got a strong signaling that probably this all man-eater, and that could be one of the reasons that why we have got this, high conflict zone on the skew. If this is not learned behavior, that any animal can take an opportunity killing a human being or the livestock, and that turn to be again depredation on this kind of the thing. So we try to answer this kind of the question, whether is a learned behavior or is a random process in this one. We try to look what kind of the phase are there. As I told you, it's very, very difficult to work in the mountain because it's not a protected area. And we try to use a very simple tool, what we call the track plot. Track plot is simply nothing, is making a simple soil and try to spray the clay powder on that one. And any animal which comes in that area, it try to leave what they can call the foot impression, and we try to monitor. So this is a very, very simple tool which has been widely used for monitoring purposes, and we relied on this to monitor the prey species. Interesting thing that besides this monitoring of this one, we walked a number of the transects in that area. And if you try to see, most of the prey species of the leopard, chetal, sambar, wild pig, barking deer, in all the PA like Rajaji, Ranthambore, they form a very high constitute in their diet. But when we look when we look this Pauri Garhwal, you will be surprised to see that we saw very few animals of the major prey species. And if you try to see the wild pig, almost 1,000 kilometers if you walk, you might be able to see a 9 animal, or the barking deer, if you walk 1,000, you might be able to see 20 animals. So definitely this whole districts have a very, very low wild prey species available in comparison to what we see in the most of the protected area. So prey has been a very, very limiting factor in this whole Pauri Garhwal district. There are no wild preys are present in abundance. We also looked the encounter rate or the track index, and the same finding came that in the high conflict zone, the abundance of this wild prey are very, very low. So based on the line transit and based on the track plot, we have come on conclusion that in the whole Pauri Garhwal, the wild prey presence are very, very low, and that could be one of the reasons why animal has been going predating on the livestock or human being. We also try to use the camera trap also, and the same finding came. So one of the conclusions which we draw from this study is that there are no wild prey are present in this whole Pauri Garhwal district, almost close to 5,400 square kilometer, in comparison to what we see in case of the protected area. And you can see in this and how a wild pig can make a life miserable for the leopard. So it's very, very hard to kill that wild pig by the leopard, because they can really make it miserable, and if they are not able to conditions are there. So this is the one thing is very, very important. Then what we looked at, what the leopards are eating in that area when there are no wild prey. So we looked the food habits of this prey species, especially what the leopard species in this for 5 years. And what interesting we found is that most of the 90% diet, or most of the diet of a leopards in this area is either dog or the cattle. And they constitute almost 95% of the diet. So majority of the diet of this leopard in this area is either dog or the cattle. And most of the proportion of the cattle or the dog, if you try to see in the protected area, is less than a 10%. So probably they are thriving very well. And if you try to see that first photograph which I showed you, they are all heavily built, and they probably relying on eating most of the dog and the cow. And this could be one of the reasons that white dog in the pet dogs, they have got a spike collars on their neck, especially in the Himalayas, and just to try to avoid. So, but definitely we found the dog and the cattle is one of the major prey in this species. If you try to see, most of the protected area, their proportion of the domestic dog or cattle is a very, very less than 10%. So this is probably what we found is that the animals are able or to manage the livestock killing or the dog, which are much more heavily being poached. And probably there are controversies there in the Garhwal or the Himalaya, whether dog can really give an alarm warning or they are very prone for the human depredation. So still this is the it's very, very difficult to answer the question. But what we found, the dog and cattle have been there. Then the question comes that whether it is high conflict zone or medium conflict zone, they have a really high number of leopard, or they have just normally distributed across the landscape. We use the number of the way of assessing the abundance of this animal, because it's all, as I told you, the non-protected area. You can't leave the camera trap. They are difficult to walk. There are no road network. So it is a tough job to work in the Himalayas where there are no road network. But we try to use a number of ways this one. When we try to look the scrap and the scat count, and what we found in high and medium zone, there are high number of the scats are there compared to the low conflict zone. So one of the things what try to see this thing, that definitely there are high use of those area by the leopard. This is the one thing which we are able to find. And we try to look the camera trap also, and if you try to see, large number of the animals have been found in the same area. So one of the questions we will try to answer the question, because most of these animals are territorial. So the question comes whether they are able to patrolling that area, mark the territory, or they have completely changed their behavior to remain like a macaque. So this is the one thing we try to understand the questions in that area. And what we found interestingly, that there is a high number of the captures has been there. So definitely the high conflict zones and the medium conflict zones have a large number of the individuals present compared to the low conflict zone. So capture frequency has been a much more higher in this area. And then we try to see, question is that one, whether they have been able to move in that area or not. Very interesting questions which we try to understand this one, because if you try to see the macaque, what they usually do, they simply come on the road and try to wait for the food and try to just to go for the roasting places. So we found that most of the leopards which are living in the high conflict zone or medium conflict, they do not move very far off. So simply they try to, take the prey in the evening time and try to take a refuge in the forest. And most of these animals, they have been traveling or moving only less than half a kilometer. So this is probably one of the reasons, is that there is a change in behavior of the animal. Otherwise, animals should have moved from one area to the another for patrolling purposes or marking territory. So one finding we found that most of the high conflict or medium conflict zones have a high science or high use of the leopard, and most of the leopard which are living in that area, they are not moving far from their refuge area. So mostly they come in the evening time, pick up either dog or the cattle and try to take a refuge in the forest. So this was probably one of the reasons that why we got a skewed predation of the human being, and not every area has got a such kind of a conflict. When we talk this, most of the pellets, what we talk, the stalking coverage is very, very crucial. No cat can kill any prey if the stalking cover is not present. And there are a lot of work people have done across in the Serengeti and other area, and they found that if the stalking cover is not present within a 30 to 50 meter, no animal can able to manage the kill. So we try to look what kind of the stalking cover is there, and if we try to see most of the area which used to be clear pine forest have been degraded and all been covered by the understory by the scrub. And this all scrub, what you try to see is a good stalking cover for the animal. So we have to see that what kind of the conflicts are there, whether those areas have got a high stalking cover or not. And this could be one of the reasons what we have found, that stalking cover on the predation has to be understood much more closely. When we look, most of the attacks where the leopards have been, kill the human beings, and we try to go to those areas and try to look back, and we try to find out that most of the leopards were able to manage the kill any human being or the child has been most of the isolated houses like this one, which has got a nice, the backyard is a nice, forest cover is there. Easily animal can come and try to pick up one of the child here and go back. So most of those locations, what we found, they are very, very close to the good, vegetation cover or good stalking cover is present in most of the places, and we try to look what kind of a stalking cover is there in that area. Most of the people, they walk through those small trails, you can try to see, and most of the trails are having a nice cover on both the sides. So probably this change in the vegetation cover in this whole Uttarakhand or maybe in the mountainous habitat has been one of the reasons that animal able to manage the kill for the either human being or the livestock and able to survive much more efficiently than any other place for this one. We try to look the areas that, if we try to see most of the area what we found have where the attacks have been taken place, it has got a high shrub cover. So this is one of the reasons that we should try to understand the behavior of the animal, especially with respect to stalking cover. If the stalking cover is there, is much more conducive habitat to kill for any kind of the prey, whether human being or the wild or the livestock. This is the one thing is very, very important what we found, and most of the kills were highly dominated by the scrub cover. We try to look at how far the killing scrub cover was present from the killing site. So we looked at try to quantify the scrub cover from the killing site, and we found that within the 50 to 100 meter, the scrub cover is much more highly dominating. It means this is the zone where the animal has been able to manage to kill any human being or kill the whatever you can call the livestock. So if the cover is being manipulated, then probably it might be possible to minimize. And what we did in one of the experiments, we took some of the such lonely, isolated houses, and we remove all the understory or the whatever you can call the stalking cover within the 200 meter. And we did not find any animal able to come to the same area again and again because stalking cover has been removed within the 200 meter. And as I told you, no predator can kill if the stalking cover is not present. So this is the one thing is to try to understand the dynamics of the leopard behavior, especially stalking behavior and how animal can able to manage. And what I understood in this area, by doing some kind of the minimal, some experiment or some management intervention where we remove the stalking cover, and we did not find much predation on those areas where there was no stalking cover. So we have to look much more critically with respect to the stalking behavior, and we might be able to get some answer how animal has been behaving in that area. Then we try to look what kind of the seasons, what kind of the predations have been taking place in that area. And we try to quantify whether this particular time the animal is being killing much more human being or the livestock. So we try to look what time or what season the animal is being much more prone killing the human being or the livestock. What we found in this one, most of the human deaths were much more in the rainy and the winter season. If you try to see during the summer time, the understory is very, very less or very, very poor. So just after the monsoon, the understory has been heavily built up, and that could be one of the reasons that most of the killing or the human depredation was much more prone during the rainy and the winter. So you got some window to do some kind of the management intervention. So if you try to have some kind of the house or there is a chance of probability, and try to see in this area how best if it's a rainy time or winter time, try to do some kind of the management intervention, you might be able to minimize the such conflict. But definitely we found that rainy and the winter season are much more prone for what we can call human depredation by the leopard. Then we try to look when the animal is able to manage to kill the or try to what kind of the activity, what time the animal has able to kill. And interestingly, if you try to see that most of the time in the hills, animal is much more active or try to come, killing much more after the 4 to 5. And so we got a much more, window where you can see the chances of killing is much more higher in the evening time, just, after 4 or 5. And this is the time when most of the people are coming back home. So this is the one window we got 4 to 9 or 4 to 10 is much more higher. And there's a small window which we got during the early morning. So these two are the area or the two windows are there where there are much more chances a human depredation might take place. And we try to coincide with this window with respect to what kind of the human activity take place in that area. So this is one thing we should get a good information and try to nail down what is the window when we should act it, or what is the window it can provide you some kind of the management intervention. So we got the two window early morning and the late evening, then the chances of the human depredation are much more higher. And when we look what people have been doing. So early morning, most of the time in the hills, people go, for the toilet outside the houses because they do not have a permanent toilet system. And early morning, they also go to the school. So most of the time, the people, they come back to the, in the evening time. So some of the things what we suggested that we may have to change whatever you can call the school timing, that school timing should be changed. And the people should reach back to home, or the children should reach back to home by 5 o'clock. So some kind of the human behavior is required to be changed if you really want to do. And most of the people, if they are coming back home, or especially women, they go to the field for collection of the grasses or the water, they should be back to the house by 4 or 5 p.m. So some of the activity which are much more there, the daytime there's possible, but these are the activity if you try to see in the evening time, children are returning from the schools, women are returning from the jungle, worker returning from the places. So these are the activity which we have to minimize, and we suggested with the administration that try to do some kind of the intervention with respect to this management of the people, or try to reach this one, or try to change the school timing. So we have to synchronize the window when the predation is much more higher, and try to look what kind of the activities are taking place during that window. And we may have to change a small behavior in the human being to try to minimize conflict. So we got some of the clues when these problems are prevail and what activities are taking place, and that could be one of the way we have found this one. When we try to look the leopard attack with respect to this section is when this attack has been taking place, whether this females are more prone to the human leopard depredation, or the males are much more depredation. So we try to look all the data which are available in that landscape, and we try to analyze. And what we interestingly found in this area, that most of the killing is being a child lifting. And if you try to see the 96 or 68%, if you try to see all human depredation, the children below 15 years has been picked up. So most of the children which are below 15, they are much more prone for the leopard depredation or lifting by the leopard. So this is the one thing which we got an information. There are 16%. What we found is that around 11% is between 16 to 30. But definitely if you try to see that there is a high proportion of the children which are below 15 all are prone for this one. So, and if you try to see the male and female, we found the high proportion of the females have been, predated by the leopard. And most of the hills, the females have been working in the field. Mothers have been taking this child, and childs are playing outside the house. And another reason is that what we found, most of the hills, especially males, have gone to the plains for the work. So there is not much child care is there. Most of the time in the evening time, mother is cooking the food in the house, and then most of the childs are playing outside this one. But definitely these are the thing which we got, that the children are much more prone than the adult. But definitely this is the one thing which is very, very carefully we have to see in that area. Another thing what we try to look, what are the other factors which are prevailing in that landscape? We try to look the electricity conditions, whether electricity is present or not in that house where this problem has taken place. Most of the human conflict have been taken place. Most of the houses, they do not have the light. So this was one of the reasons what we found, that the houses, there are no light, and people are just going for the toilet work or some purposes for the in the forest, nearby the forest, and that could be one of the reasons. So most of the houses, they were not having the light. Then we look whether the animals have been able to come to the village and try to lift the child. But in this Pauri Garhwal district, what we found is that most of the thing has happened in the lonely situated houses. As you have seen, most of the houses which are there in that landscape, they are all isolated houses. One house somewhere in the hills, some like our isolated houses, and that could be one of the reasons. So most of the child liftings had taken place with respect to the isolated houses. Animals have never come and ventured in the village to pick up this one. And then we found whether the male were present in the house or not. And most of the proportion of the attacks where there are no males are present. So these three things have been taken place, that there are light is not present, the toilet facilities are not there, and people are going outside, and the males are not present. So looking to this condition, what we suggested the management authority or district administration, we have tried to map those isolated houses in the Pauri Garhwal, and we have provided, these houses to the district administration. So they should try to get a light. That's the one thing we have tried to suggest. And under this, the toilet facility with the Government of India program launched that one, we have also sent a proposal to the ministry and tried to see how those houses can get the toilet facility. Because these two are the major causative factors which we have found are much more leading to the such conflict. So this is the way we should try to get information, try to see how best we can do a management intervention, and we try to do that. Definitely these houses do not have a light, and we have tried to identify in those areas. So another important thing is that, whenever the problem is there, one thing what I learned in this whole business is that most of these problems are site-specific. So whatever we have learned in the Uttarakhand, it may not be applicable to Maharashtra or West Bengal, because the Maharashtra data, if you try to see, is an entirely different kind of a thing. It is a much more sugarcane. So such things have to be intensely studied in most of the areas, and we have to remember, or we try to understand the behavior. That's the one of the important things is there, and we have to see that most of these are the site-specific. So please do not carry it away. What we observed in the Uttarakhand, it might be applicable to the Himachal Pradesh or to some extent Jammu and Kashmir, but it may not be applicable to the West Bengal or the Maharashtra. So all those area which are the high conflict zones are there in our country, we should try to take a detailed study and try to look best what kind of the behavior change have taken place, whether this problem is a random or what could be the causative factor. So we have to address those causative factors, and then we can try to do the management intervention. And what we learned from this whole business, that in the Uttarakhand, there are one thing what we found is that most of the prey is very, very low. Now this is again the question come how to build the prey. It's very, very hard to build the wild prey. We have been talking to the Khatista when he was the conservative forest in the Pauri Garhwal, and there are some suggestions came that we should try to reintroduce some of the species which are mountainous one. But definitely one thing is that what we found, what are the feral cattle are there, we should not try to remove those feral cattle at the moment. But we have to look, and we know leopards, they are fond of the, whatever you can call the langur, there might be possible to this one, or try to minimize whatever you can call is any poaching of the wild prey. So this is one of the question is that how best we can rebuild the wild prey, but it's a very, very challenging thing that one thing what we understand is the dependence of leopard wild prey is low. So most of the animals, they are surviving on cattle and the wild dog. And if you remember, I got this inverse relationship between the human depredation and the cattle purchase. So at the moment, whatever the free-ranging cattle are there, we should not try to gather them. They should not let it to be in the free-ranging condition, and that might be possible to have a less human depredation. As I told you, the controversy still exists in that area, whether dogs really provide a advanced warning or they are attracting the villages or the houses to kill the dog. So this is the one thing what we suggested, that dog definitely give an early warning. We should try to keep inside the houses. They should not be let it to be remain outside. So in that process, the leopard should not come looking for the dog and try to pick up. So this is the one thing we should try to understand what we can call the presence of the dog in that area and the leopard behavior. But definitely at the moment, what we suggested, that dog can be kept inside the house instead of living outside that one, and the cattle should not be gathered again from this area. And there should be a compensation should be given if the cattle has been killed. But another thing what we learned is that the leopard abundance is relatively higher in medium and conflict, and probably they move shorter distances. It means what we learned the leopard behavior or feline ecology or biology, that most of the animals, they have got a territoriality. The territoriality, what means the animals try to keep moving from one place to the another or one village to the another to maintain the territory. So probably in this case, what we learned is that most of the animals, they have probably habituated to what you can call the soft prey. And there was a nice study in the Africa, what they, by Bothman and Forrest. And what they say, the animals are probably killing regularly high frequency of easier prey as observed in the poor prey environment. So the most of these soft prey which are available in this landscape, that could be one of the reasons that the conflict is much more higher, because they have been trying to look for this one. So I strongly believe that probably the animals have lost its territorial marking behavior. That could be one of the reasons they are not moving far off. They are simply killing in the evening time when the livestock or the dog, and then take a refuge back to the forest. And that could be one of the reasons. So it is similarly what we see in the macaque. The macaque, they simply wait on the road, get the food, and try to go nearby the refuge area. But definitely it requires to understand much more things there. The possibly, as I told you, this high conflict dog business still is very, very, require much more in-depth studies. But definitely, as I told you, the 50% diet is of the dogs, and that could be, and the dogs, they do breed a lot. That's one other thing. And that's why we have to see whether leopards are venturing into the human habitations in high conflict area or not. So this is the one thing we should try to correlate and try to see whether this is the factor which is affecting. Most of the thing what we told is the majority of victims are the children below 15 years old. So this is the one thing which we, and the females are much more prone than the males. As I told, the females have been working much more than the males in the hills area, but definitely it has given us some clue that whenever there are houses which have got the children below, those houses, if they are isolated, they may be prone for much more reproduction by the leopard. So one thing which we got, the children below 15 are much more prone. Frequency of attacks are much more before 8 a.m. and usually after 4 to 9 p.m. So we got a 2 window. So any management intervention which we want to do it, changing the human behavior or anything, these are the 2 window we have to minimize the such activity. The leopard get a less chance to kill any human depredation taking place during this window. So definitely we got these 2 windows which are much more prevalent. What we learned from this business is that houses on the fringes of the villages which are isolated, without electricity, surrounded by heavy scrub cover are much more prone. So if you have a houses which have been of this category and of this category, we should try to nail down, try to put a management intervention, because such conditions are prevailing or conducive for the leopard to come and either have a child lifting or killing any human being. So these are the two important things which we have tried to find out, and we have recommended to the department what can be done for this one. In order to, minimize such conflict, the former Negi Sahab or the late Negi Sahab has suggested to come out some brochures and some kind of the posters. And based on our finding, what we have come out, and this is what we call it, the Guldar ke badte aatak se kaise bacha jaye. So we came out a simple tips, or the whatever you can call the small booklet, and a series of the posters have been prepared. And most of these have been widely distributed by the NGOs as well as by the department. And especially in those high conflict zones, these have been widely distributed, and people have been told, and there are some kind of the human participation have been taken place. Try to tell them what they have to do if they try to see the leopard. So these are the things which we have tried to do it, and we found that might be possible to minimize the such conflict. So what finally we suggested the department have a management interventions in this area if you really want to minimize. So first of the things what we try to provide the map, that we have to identify the isolated houses in high and medium conflict zone. It's not everywhere. So once we have got a high or medium conflict zone, which I told you, they are not very large chunk of the area. There are only few grids which we have found. So in those grids, we have to look those houses which are isolated. That's the first thing. There are no toilet, there are no electricity, there are no water facility. So these houses should be identified the first, and try to do some kind of the management intervention, which I'll be showing you in the point number 3. There is urgent need to restore the wild prey. As I told you, it's very easy to say it, but it's very, very difficult to increase the wild prey. And it's very, very, very simple to say, but definitely it's a challenging task. But definitely we try to suggest that in the whole Pauri Garhwal or the Garhwal region, because the poaching is much more rampant in compared to the Kumaon. And why Kumaon doesn't have much high conflict compared to the Garhwal, and that could be one of the reasons. So we did this some kind of the NGO, requested the NGO try to canvass it, try to tell them that what are the consequences of the wild prey poaching may have led to the high conflict, but definitely we have tried to do concern. Another thing what we suggested, that these are the houses which are qualifying isolated, no electricity, no toilet, no water facility. Try to remove any understory or the ground cover within the 200 meters. So if you try to remove any cover, as I told you, the stalking cover is a very, very crucial for all the parrots. If the stalking cover is not present, no animal can manage to kill this one. And one has to manage, try to remove regularly, try to remove any stalking cover if it's present within the 200 meters. And as I told you, stalking cover, what they require is around 50 to 60 meters. So by removing any stalking cover within the 200 meters of circumference of those houses, this will be very rarely to get any human being or the child depredation can take place. Another thing what we suggested, that women and children below 15 years should told to move in the group. Because whenever they are coming from the schools or the evening timing, and you have seen most of those small trails of the past are have got a high understory. So if the children are coming from those areas, if they are lonely walking, they are much more prone for that area. So this is the one thing that we suggested, that especially they should always move in this one, and parents should not leave their children unattended during the early morning or the late evening. Because as you have seen, some of the houses, the mother is cooking the food until the kids are playing outside. So we have suggested that try to identify those houses and tell them that your children or the child should not be left outside during before 8 and after 4 to 5 outside the houses, or should be under the particular attention, or there should be parental care. So these are some of the suggestions which we gave to the department. And we should suggested that children should reach home from the school any other work before 4 p.m. to minimize the sun's conflict, and needed school timing should be changed. So we have suggested the district administration try to do it, try to change it, and this is the one thing is there. And Another important thing, as I told you, what we monitor this leopard movement is based on the track plot, the camera tag. And still we, as I told you, we still not able to understand the ranging behavior. So most of the conflict area, as I told you, first we have to find out whether the conflict is everywhere or it is only few places. If there are few places, then what is the ranging behavior of the animal, which is one of the crucial parameter has to be understood. And I strongly believe that if animal is retaining its territoriality, the problem will be diffused. It cannot happen at one place. So these 2-3 dynamics has required to be understood if you really want to manage the leopard conflict, and we have to see this one. So what we suggested the Uttarakhand to go for the, try to look much more behavioral aspects of this one. And as I told you, I personally feel that most of these monitor are not a random process, and probably it is a learned behavior, but our data is a very, very small at the moment, and we have to further strengthen by knowing through the genetic, try to see how this randomness is being present or how relatedness is being present in that area. And one thing is that we have to get a ranging behavior. So if you understand the ranging behavior of that particular animal or the individual in the conflict areas which are high or the low, you will able to understand how animal is behaving. And this is the 3 things which we should try to do it if you really want to, whatever you can call the conflict. So most of our understanding, what as I told you, still if you try to look at the literature, there are no such detailed studies available for the leopard, in spite of having a huge management issue. So we try to strengthen more and more studies, especially in the conflict area, and try to look the behavior, try to look the whether it's a learned behavior or not, or whether the prey is present or not. And this can allow us to do a much more a scientific base on the management intervention. But definitely is a nice learning which we had at the institute, and definitely it has provided a department. And as I told you, we did some kind of experiment. It has worked very well. By removing the stocking cover, we never got any depredation or the child lifting those houses which have been regularly maintained. So what we do is some kind of the management intervention if you really want to do it much more this way. So we are looking such beautiful conservation of this animal. As I told you, is a very beautiful animal, and this is the one thing which we learned a lot during this process. So another dimension which has been, most of the time people have asked, and we have been killing the, as soon as we declare the man-eater, and the question comes whether we have really killed the real man-eater or we have killed the innocent. So this is the big challenge which has been all managers have been facing. There is no ready-made solution is there at the moment, but across the world people have tried to find out by looking at the new innovative technology or the DNA technology or the DNA forensic technology to find out which animal is a culprit animal. So this is the new era which has been coming up, because at the moment we are not 100% sure whether we have killed the real man-eater or we have killed an innocent animal. Looking to this one, this is the new era which, as I told you, this is going to be coming across the world. People are using what I call the DNA forensic technique to identify the conflict individual. So if you can really identify whether this is the real conflict individuals are not there, and there are 3 species where we have been trying to look the information. Because especially when you are like an elephant, nobody knows whether the crop breeder is the frequent crop breeding or is a random crop breeding. So these are the questions which we do not have an answer at the moment. We may have to use an example of the DNA forensic technique, and we have made some attempt looking at the Rajaji Tiger Reserve, then looking the elephants especially, and we try to answer whether these all crop breeders are the frequent crop breeders or they are the random crop breeders. So we got almost 70% individual which we identified through the DNA, because most of the crop breeding takes place in the night time. Nobody knows whether it's a male or female, whether they are frequently coming to the same crop breeding or it's going from one village to the another village. So we tried to answer this question by using the DNA forensic technology, and we found that most of the animals which are very frequent crop breeders, they every day or every night come to the the crop fields, and probably they go from one village to another. The maximum distance what we found is around 3 to 5 kilometers from one village to another. So what I want to suggest is that the coming era is going to come out why using the DNA forensic. And I give you one simple example which we did for the Corvette, which we have a nice learning. So in the Corvette, we have tried to look. There was a one man-eater which was being killed close to the Garhia, which you might have been down in the Ramnagar, close to the Ramnagar division. And it was an interesting example which we did by using the DNA technology. The first woman was killed by the, in the buffer area by the Sundarkal, which is the somewhere here. You can see this is a Sundarkal, it's a buffer area. One woman was killed in the November. And then another woman was further have a same fate in the November 18. And based on the Pagbar department has declared is a female animal. And thereafter, this has been continued. There was a petal tiger attack on the woman again. And then on January 18, the attempt was made to shoot the tiger. So it was declared a man-eater in the Garja beach. And somehow this animal escaped by the hunter. And we found a blood stains which were present on the leaf, which was collected by the department, and it was sent to us. So actually, if you try to see, this is Sundarkal where the woman was killed, and this is a Gargia where hunter has tried to shoot that animal. And as you can see here, a Garcia beat, and then it was escaped and the blood was collected. And then again, the blood was collected on the 19th. On the dried blood, it was sent to us. And on January 17th, finally, the tiger was killed on that day in the Sundarkal. And when they killed, that was turned to be, so we got 4 samples out of, this case. And as I told you, the department has declared it a female. When they killed and when we did the blood analysis on this example, on this, whatever you can call the January, when we got his blood sample on January 17, we told the department that it is a male animal based on the DNA. But the department said it is a female animal based on the Pagmar measurement. And finally, when they killed the animal, it turned to the male animal. So there was a big dilemma was there whether they really killed a man-eater or whether they killed the innocent animal. So there was a lot of news media is there, but definitely after killing this animal, there was no incidents have taken place. And when we did this analysis of the 4 samples which were collected from this area, what we learned from this one more thing, that never try to declare a male or female based on the Pagmar. We did a nice study in the Ranthambore Tiger Reserve, and most of the time we say if it is a rectangular or is a square is a male or female. So we use the only 2, length and the width, and we try to qualify. So what we found based on our Ranthambore data, that 84% percentage time we are correctly identified, but there are 16% we may be able to misclassify male or female. If you put few more measurements, still the accuracy is only 93. But you need almost 7 measurements, whatever, if you really want to have a 99% probability that you can confirm based on the Pagmar. So what my suggestions would be there, that never try to declare a sex based on the Pagmar, because there is still a probability of the error prevail in the data set, and we should not try to get a confusion or later on a, whatever you can call the putting a humiliation that you say is the male or it was shown to be a female. So my advice would be there, never try to declare based on the Pagmar, because we have shown that there is a strong error still there based on the few measurements. When we did the DNA, as I told you, all 4 samples were turned to be the male tiger. So what they tried to attempt to kill, which escaped, is turned to be the male tiger, and based on the DNA. So finally, we confirmed based on those blood stains before animal was killed, and the finally animal was killed, it was the male animal. And when they took the DNA based on the individual identity, what we found, all the 4 samples which are injured animals as well the killed animals belong to the same individual. So finally we confirmed that what they tried to kill the animal or on the January, it was the same individual had it been killed. So one thing is, as I told you, that in the coming era, we may have to rely based on the DNA forensic techniques to identify whether it's really a man-eater or we are killing the innocent animal. But a lot of R&D is required in this area before we can say. So what we learned from this whole business is that if they would have collected more samples from during that January to the November to the January, it would have been a much more understanding how a man-eater is moving in that area. So this was the one thing, as I told you, they have just collected the two samples. One is the blood stain which was found on the leaf and the stone, and a final animal when was killed. And most of these concrete animals have used 17 square kilometers. So one thing is that if there is a man-eater, we should try to intensely collect the samples like the scat sample, urine, hair, whatever you see in that area, and try to use the DNA forensic tools, and that might be able to use it. And as I told you, that we need an extensive sample. Another thing is that on the whole, the most of this concrete area, we should try to develop what you can call the genetic ID. So this can be really can help us to nail down is it the same animal which has been turned to the man-eater or not. So what we learned in this whole process that the new era is going to use much more DNA-based technology, and we have to involve a DNA-based technology to understand much more concrete area. So this was the one learning which we got it, and we tried to see how best we can spread it to the other concrete area, and that could be one of the way which I would suggest. So what we try to see that still we do not have a answer whether we have killing the innocent animal or whether we are killing the elite man-eater. So, but definitely by using, as I told you, an example of the corvette, we might able to, answer the question. But definitely for these three species, we may have to rely on the DNA forensic technology, and it can really get an answer. And we learned a lot from the elephant data, and it has found there are only few frequent crop raiders. Not every individual is a crop raider. So what I want to convey the message that what is a simple learning is there. We have to go a long way to understanding the concrete individuals, and there are no ready-made solutions are present at the moment. Yeah, that's all I would like to share with you what I learned while working on the human leopard concrete in the Pauri Garhwal. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Goyal. That was a very informative and detailed presentation that you gave about the human-wildlife conflict regarding leopards in Pauri Garhwal area. There are a few questions that the participants have sent, which I will pose to you. Umesh Dhotekar sir needs to know that if the feral animals, that is mostly the feral dogs, if they are controlled, will these animals that are prevailing in that area migrate to some other place, or will they continue being there?
This is the one thing, as I told you, that still as I told you, we have to understand the ranging behavior, what happens to that one. But definitely, if the animal is a very versatile as a journalist, so they may switch to some of the other species which might be their rodent there, we do not know, because these animals are looking the soft prey. Okay, so if that soft prey is not available, they may switch to some other animal. Like in the Sahara Desert or in the Sariska, we have found 99% that was of the rodent. So they have the capability, but since the dogs were present, they are soft prey and they are easy to kill it. So we have to see, whatever we can call this management experiment has to be done. But based on the ecology or biology of species, the animal has the capability of switching from a large prey to the very smallest prey, what I call the rodent, which has been found across. Even the Dashikam study has also found that 99% is the rodent. So this is the one thing we do not have a ready-made answer, but looking to ecology or biology, I am confident the animal might switch over to the other species if the dogs have been controlled. But it has to be learned, it has to be done in the phased manner, and because switching from one prey to another is not a very, very behavioral change immediately. So we have to learn a lot by doing some kind of the management intervention, and that might able to allow a understanding much more what will happen if we remove the dog.
Janelle Singh sir says that habitat prey-based loss appears to be the main conflict in this area. So what management interventions can be best suited or needed for the problem area?
Yeah, as I told you, saying the wild, investing the wild prey is much more easier. Some suggestion gave that where are the langurs are there, the langurs can be reintroduced in that area, and that might be another good prey for this one. One thing is that we have to, teach the people. We have to tell the people why this problem is not that severe in the Kumaon than the Garhwal. Garhwal has a very severe problem than the Kumaon. Because the Kumaon, there is a less number of the poaching are going there compared to the Garhwal area. So we have to tell the people that do not try to kill the wild prey. Even the jungle fowl is there, college is there. It might able to come out slowly to switch over to that area. So as I told you that we have to learn a much more a behavioral change. If I remove cattle and the dog, what will happen to that area? We do not have any such answers at the moment. But by looking the ecology or biology, our ability, we presume that the animal might switch over. But building the prey is not an easy answer. Nobody can head so far. But definitely some of the reintroduction of the, again, those, whatever you can call the mountain ungulates, like we have a chital, we have a sambar, even the pigs also, that might be possible to enrich. But somewhere we have to do some experiment in the high confidence zone. If we release the wild pig, what happens? We do not know those answers. And we have to learn a lot in the long process.
Ma'am Archana Bahuguna would like to know that can media play an important role in improving the conditions of this, like people, will media help in creating awareness among people regarding this conflict and how they can save themselves from this?
As I told you, the media can play a vital role, but definitely the NGO has a very, very significant role. So one of the things which I, understood in this area, we have to identify which are my hotspots are there. It's not everywhere is a problem. So if you can tackle the hotspots by having a local convincing with them, NGO telling with them, teachers teaching them what they have to teach the children, I think it has worked very well. Then the NGO has took this one. So we go for the step by step that what are the, because we have to understand for the ecology or biology, what is the crucial management intervention we need. As I told you, that we suggested the 2 or 3 points of the crucial management intervention, that there should not be stocking cover, and we have to identify, and under this, toiletry scheme of the Government of India, we gave a nice proposal to the Government of India to provide the toilet, and those toilets have been built. So we try to do how best we can play, whether it's the media or the NGO, but ultimately we try to see how best we can minimize this conflict, especially human depredation. And in this area, as I told you, the most of the children are much more impacted than the adult or like this one. Adults are sometimes they are injured, but there are ways or means to deal that one. So definitely media and NGO can play a very, very vital role. Government or the individual scientists cannot do that kind of a job. And I have used some of the NGOs to canvas or try to distribute our manual as well as the posters. So it worked very well, yes.
Jarnail Singh sir again would like to have posed a question asking, is there any variation in incidences in day and night time?
As I told you, the daytime very, very rare. There's very few incidences because most of the animals are been in a nocturnal evening time, just before the dusk and the dawn. So we got a nice peak. As I told you, the evening time are much more prone when the animals are much more moving in the night. And there are two kinds of the peaks are present in that area. So this can be further fine-tuned. What is it? Because this zone is still a higher zone, like 4 to 9 p.m. But if you try to do a radio collaring, which we failed to do it, we made an attempt, but we could not do it. So if we can understand much more a ranging behavior of these animals in the high conflict, I think we can get a very narrow window and it may be much more precise. But at the moment, our window is a little bit caught based on the data what we found. So this is the one thing we have to go for, what I told you, understanding more of the species behavior, and we can get a good answer how best we should minimize.
Mr. sir wants to know, after these recommendations were made by you, WII that is there any data after the period or any studies that shows what any changes at present compared to what it was at the time when you were conducting the study?
As you know, our study was almost for the 8 years. Okay, so we know during our 8 years period, but afterwards we could not get a chance to go back and look what happened. But definitely during the 8 years, we found some of the management intervention what we suggested or what we did experimental management, and it has worked very well. But there are no such data subsequently has been monitored on those sides wherever we have found whether there is a shift. So what I want to make the point, the Government of India or the State Department should invest much more effectively for understanding this species ecology or biology, as I told you, almost more than studies almost more than 10 years back, but there is no such detailed studies are there. And across the country, if you try to look the literature, you will find all sporadic information. There is no detailed study except the Maharashtra, which has got it, or maybe some extent West Bengal. So we have to invest a lot to understand this animal if you really want to minimize the problem.
Shraddha Ghai wants to know, how can we combat human-wildlife leopard-human conflict in territorial forest and biodiversity zones in cities like Mumbai, where it has SGNP, and coexistence can come in?
So if you see Sanjay Gandhi, a typical situation is there, but only if there are two things which we have to understand. If there are wild prey is there, and if human activity is very, very important. And even the Sanjay Gandhi, we have been talking for so many years, but so far we never failed to understand how the ranging behavior previous in those areas. Whether animals are much more active during the daytime or night, most of the information has come from the camera trap. So what I want to, like, Sanjay Gandhi has been, I remember when the Ravi Chalam went long back, or the Advait went long back in that area to study, but there are no such detailed study of the at the individual level which is lacking. So most of this information, as I told you, is site specific. It cannot be generated from one management intervention to the another. So we have to look more on this ranging behavior, or how animal is behaving in that area. And if the population, if the animal is moving from one area to another, as I told you, they are maintaining their territory, then the problem will be diffused. It cannot happen at one place. So such behavior, still I told you, we have been lacking in that species, and we have to invest a lot to understand this behavior pattern of the individuals.
Would you suggest DNA forensic sciences to study such places?
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you. This is the new era which across the grizzly bear in the USA and the Canada, they are extensively using. You're trying to develop the DNA database to find out, when this animal has come in the conflict, where this animal was found, and it really minimizes your, more or increases much more effectiveness to manage the individual level. So, like if you take the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, if you have a database of all the individuals, and if any individual come in the conflict in that way, people are picking the saliva from the conflict area or where the human being injured, and you can find out which individual is being found in the culprit. So this is a long way which I told you. People have developed a nice database on the grizzly bear, which is a major conflict in the North America. So we have to go this DNA-based technology to establish the genetic ID, which can allow you to find out which animal is coming in the culprit or the conflict, and where the animal has been found in that area. So all those effectiveness can be enhanced to do some kind of a management intervention. And I am sure this is the new era which is coming extensively in using the conflict individuals to find out who is the major culprit, and no innocent has been killed in that process.
She wants to further know who can be approached to fund such a long-term study if anybody wants to conduct such a study.
No, we have to conduct it. If we have, it is a national problem. So this is a national policy has to be seen. And even at the state level, they have to invest to understand the individual level. Otherwise, still what we are doing is all ad hoc mechanism. And that's why we have been doing for that plan. Yeah.
I hand over to Dr. Shivaji Chavan, as he wants to say something.
Yeah.
Over to you, please.
Yeah. Dr. Goyal, I'm really thankful to you and thankful to all the audience here. This is a live and a burning problem. Human-wildlife conflict, human-leopard conflict, human-elephant conflict. And conflict has not really been understood. Those being site-specific. And we will be having such more episodes with Dr. Goyal as the technique is gradually developing. And more and more places it is being adopted. That is the beauty thing. So with this, I would like to wrap up saying that this is a very nice example as to understand the methodology to develop various sites in the country where this problem is big. Because the streamlined systematic methodology is extremely essential, and I think we have benefited a lot from that. I hand over to Dr. Nusrat. Go ahead with both of thanks. Maybe Umesh.
On behalf of Wildlife and Bee Protection Foundation, I thank all the participants who participated in this talk, and a special thanks to Dr. Goyal for making such a wonderful presentation, which was very informative and helped us learn a lot of things about the leopard and how conflicts can be looked at and mitigation measures can be developed regarding leopard and bee. Thank you very much, Dr. Goyal.
Yeah. So I thank you everyone, and I'm really I hope you must have enjoyed and finding the time to listen this one. And thanks to everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, Goyal sir.
Thanks and nice meeting you, sir.
You have got a lot of comments which we will circulate to you.
Yeah.